Donald Trump has issued a flurry of executive orders.
President Trump continuing to make good on several campaign promises with a series of executive orders.
He's up in the morning, hasn't slept for God knows how long, on January 20th.
Swears in, boom, gone. We're in the room at Capital One Arena. He's signing executive orders.
One of them outlawed DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, quotas, or reverse racial discrimination, whichever term you like to use, in government. But it doesn't, I think, apply to private entities unless you rule that any private entity, i.e. a university like mine, Stanford, who gets federal funds will be subject to it. And that's going to be tricky, but I hope he tries to make that executive order as well.
The latest is an end to the Biden-era mandates for diversity, equity, and inclusion programs within the federal government. All federal DEI staff have been ordered to be placed on paid administrative leave.
At the beginning of the new spring semester, had a class offered by a Jewish professor on the history of Israel and Judaism in the Middle East, and it was swarmed by pro-Palestinian protesters. We don't know who they were. They had masks on, of course, and they disrupted the class because it was taught by a Jewish person, and there were Jewish students there, and they disrupted it.
This encampment at Stanford is just one of dozens of similar protests popping up on college campuses across the country.
Victor Davis Hanson argues that for years, students at top universities have engaged in radical activism without repercussions. But is that about to change? Hanson thinks that the tide may be turning, especially if Donald Trump's policies put pressure on universities. From disrupted classes at Columbia to student visa holders facing scrutiny, the consequences could be severe.
Columbia University, they are now looking at these people. I would advise all of these people, though, this is not Joe Biden. If you are on a student visa and you disrupted or broke into a classroom and you committed a felony, or the university suspends you, then I think it's very likely that the State Department will look at your student visa.
International students with F-1 visas who participated in pro-Palestinian protests woke up to a threat by President Donald Trump. They could be deported.
This came up because at New York University, last year, during the finals, no less, the same type of protest swarmed the library and disrupted everything. And New York University has suspended those pro-Palestinian, I shouldn't say pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas protesters for 1 year.
Unsuspend our students now! Unsuspend our students now!
After New York University suspended pro-Palestine students for their activism, protesters have gathered outside of the university to demand that these suspensions be revoked immediately.
So what are they going to do if some of them are on foreign student visas? My point is this: all of these elite students at these elite universities talk a great game, but when they've never faced any consequences, if Donald Trump and if these universities are afraid of Donald Trump and they clamp down, I think you're going to see deterrence start to work to discourage other protests. Because one thing we know about all these young students, they are careerists and they are used to being pampered, whether they're Americans or foreigners. And if some of them have to go back to their beloved Palestine or Syria or Egyptians, they're going to be very unhappy. And if some of these children of the elite are suspended or charged with felonies, and that's on their record, they're going to be very unhappy.
Some billionaires, like Mark Andreessen, believe that today's students from elite universities are not what they used to be. Instead of being highly skilled and innovative, many have become radical activists, more focused on ideology than competence. Worse, Andreessen suggests that some of these graduates actively seek to undermine the very companies that hire them, pushing agendas that threaten the foundations of these very corporations.
There's a wonderful interview with Mark Andreessen the Wall Street entrepreneur, financier, but especially techie, and he was the one that created Netscape.
Somebody cracks a joke, right? Somebody cracks a joke.
Yep.
If the other person laughs, the conversation is on.
Yeah, yeah.
If the other person doesn't laugh, back slowly away from the scene. Yeah, I didn't mean anything by it.
He's a multi-billionaire, along with his partner, Ben Horowitz. He gave a long interview to a New York Times columnist, Ross Tuthall. But here's what I'm interested in. At one point, he was asked, what made you change? Why did you endorse Donald Trump? And he said, among other things, they tried to control our industry. In other words, he said, we could deal with the taxes. We could deal even with the regulation, but they wanted to pick winners or losers and deny us to express ourselves. But here's the point. He said, and we looked at the students that we were hiring from these elite universities, the DEI people, the radical, and we realized from what they were saying about us, their employers, they wanted to destroy us.
Of what was sort of increasingly clearly a social revolution, like very clearly, like companies basically being hijacked to be engines of social change, social revolution. You know, the employee base is going feral. There were cases in the Trump era. There were companies, multiple companies I know, that felt like they were hours away from full-blown violent riots on their own campuses by their own employees. Like, things got really aggressive.
This should be taken very seriously, like by Stanford University, by UC Berkeley, by USC, by UCLA, by Caltech, all these universities that feed into Silicon Valley. These people are getting very tired of your graduates going in there, and they're not prepared very well. The entrance exams have been watered down. There are 4 years without a SAT requirement, 4 years without a comparative adjudication of GPA. The quality of the graduates that Silicon Valley people like Andreessen hire is going like this, and the activism and the obnoxiousness is going like this. And if I was to distill that entire interview, it would be something like, we in Silicon Valley don't really respect the Stanford brand or the UCLA brand or the Berkeley brand very much anymore, because these people are not very good at what they used to be excellent at, and they don't like the people who hire them, and the people who hire them are us. So we're going to see some big changes, and it's long overdue.
With Silicon Valley losing faith in elite universities, are we witnessing the downfall of the Ivy League's prestige? If top companies turn away from these graduates, what does that mean for the future of higher education and the workforce?